but I think you're on the right path. So we have many cities here, and in some of those cities, there were COPs. For example, there was a COP in Bonn, there was a COP in Glasgow this year, so the COP25, and the COP26, and the COP25 happening in 2019 was actually in Madrid in Spain. So congratulations to all of you who got this right. And this first question was more just like an icebreaker and to see if Mentimeter is working. I was hoping to have a bit more people answering the questions, but maybe you can also join for the second question that I have for you. So it's the same code, and those who already answered in the first question should be able to just stay there and answer the second question as well. So this is a bit to get to know you better and to see who we are all together in this audience. So I would love to know if you have ever participated in a climate change awareness activity. So this could be that you are engaged in a youth group, or maybe you wrote a blog article or anything like that. So let's see. Okay, I see. Okay, oh, it's pretty even. So some of you did, some of you never did. Very nice of you to be here. So maybe this is kind of your first climate change awareness activity to be interested in this webinar and to take part here. Some of you say multiple times. Okay, wonderful. Thank you very much for participating. We're gonna have a Mentimeter later again. So maybe for those of you who didn't work for the first time, no problem. We're gonna try this again at the end of the webinar. So I'm gonna go back to the PowerPoint. Just give me 1 minute. Okay, before we get into the questions with our panelists, I told you I'm gonna quickly present why we're all doing this. So UNICEF has been publishing a study this year, which is called "The Climate Crisis is a Child Rights Crisis." And I just put one sentence out of this to show you how urgent the problem is. And this sentence reads, "Almost every child in South Asia is exposed to at least one climate and environmental hazard, shock, stress, such as heat waves, cyclones, air pollution, flooding, and water scarcity." So I think that most of you are probably from South Asia or from India, and probably many of you did experience something like that already. I remember there were heat waves this year in India. We had floodings in Nepal, air pollution in big cities. And what I personally find shocking about this sentence is that this refers to 2021. And this refers to the present. And when we're talking about climate change, we're often talking about the future. And the thing is that we already have 1 degree of warming, and it's only going to get warmer. And if we already have the situation that almost every child in South Asia and also in many other regions of the world is affected, this is a really serious issue what we're talking about. And UNICEF was working on a children's climate risk index and launched this year as well, where they look at countries and how they are affected by climate change and also how well they can respond to climate change, so how resilient they are. And UNICEF study found that actually 4 countries in South Asia are classified as extremely high risk. This is Afghanistan, Pakistan, India, and Bangladesh. And no surprise, this leads to the fact that 69% of South Asian youth is worried about the impacts of climate change on the future, and especially also on their future. So what is the international community doing about all this? And now we're coming to COP. So actually already in 1992, so quite a while ago, the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, which is in short UNFCCC or UNFCCC, has been signed in Rio de Janeiro at the Earth Summit by 155 countries. By today, it is signed by 197 countries, so almost every country in the world. And this convention aims to stabilize greenhouse gas levels at a reasonable level, so at a level where we can actually still live on the planet so that the planet doesn't get too warm. And the countries that signed the convention, they're known as parties. And that's where we come to COP, because COP stands for the Conference of the Parties. And so the difference between UNFCCC and COP is that the COP is actually the decision-making body. So you can imagine the convention, the UNFCCC, more like a piece of paper, where the COP is actually a conference where people, states, NGOs go to and discuss climate change, what we can do about it, what has been done in the past, and assess the progress, and yeah, discuss measures. And this year was actually the biggest COP we ever had in the history. And one of the main achievements, probably one of the best known achievements of COP, is the Paris Agreement. That is a treaty that was signed at COP21 in Paris in 2015. And it's mainly known for its Article 2. And Article 2 says that the countries who signed, they try to keep the rise of temperatures well below 2 degrees. And in an ideal case, even keep them at 1.5 degrees Celsius. And if you remember, I said earlier, we are already at 1 degree Celsius warming. So this is quite ambitious, but also this is quite important. And there's one stakeholder that heavily pushes states to keep their promises made in the Paris Agreement, and this is YOUNGO. So YOUNGO is the official children and youth constituency of the UNFCCC. And this is a network of youth organizations from all around the world, of individuals who are engaged in climate change advocacy and who are willing to represent the global youth in those negotiations that are happening at COPs. But this is enough from my side. I'm not the expert here. We have 3 people that are part of YOUNGO and that know everything about it and that went to COP this year. And we're going to talk to them right now. I'm very happy to welcome Disha Sarkar, Hita Lakhani, and Vedant Kulkarni, all coming from India. Welcome to the 3 of you. I'm very glad to talk to you today, and it would be great if you could open your videos. Yes, perfect. I can see Hita there. Welcome, Hita. And Disha and Vedant, nice to see you. So before I'm going to ask you some questions, it would be great if every one of you could shortly introduce themselves, maybe just say your age, where you're from, and what your current role. That would be great. Disha, if you would like to start.
Thank you, Paula. Hello, everyone. I am Disha Sarkar. I am from Guwahati, Assam, India. And I am a part of the Action for Climate Empowerment working group of YOUNGO, which we will be talking forward in the discussion. And I have been associated with UN Resource Center, Northeast India, and with UNESCO Association Guwahati as a resource person. My age is 25, and I completed my master's in political science recently. Thank you.
Thank you, Disha. Hita, if you would like to go on.
Sure, thank you, Paula. Hi, everyone. I'm Hita from Bombay, currently in Pune. I'm currently the global focal point of YOUNGO. What that means is basically with me and my co-focal point, we're sort of the liaison between the youth and any other external body, whether it's the UN, whether it's an organization, an entity. I also work on climate change education for children, but also for adults. Super happy to be here. Thank you, Vedant.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Paula, for that amazing introduction to COP and UNFCCC, and also to my amazing panelists, Disha and Hita. I'm Vedant. I hail from Nashik, which is another city in Maharashtra, and I've been associated with the YOUNGO and helping at their global coordination team. And very exciting to be here, and would love to talk more with you.
Thank you so much to the 3 of you, and thank you for taking the time. Before we get into COP26, I would actually be interested about how you ended up there. So when did you first started to be engaged in climate change advocacy? Maybe if there was a decisive moment or experience in your life where you thought, I want to start to be part of the movement, I want to do something. So in short, how did you get into climate change advocacy? And maybe Vedant, if you're already there, if you would like to start.
Oh, before Vedant starts, Paula, would you mind unsharing the PowerPoint? Thanks.
Yes, sure. 1 second.
Awesome. So if you were to ask me how it all started for me, so it was basically, for me, I was intrigued to know more about how actual decision making takes place in the intergovernmental level, in the international space. What propels countries and the heads of states to take some action and take some inaction. So to know more about the United Nations system, I started participating in the Model United Nations processes, which was pretty interesting journey for me, starting as a delegate, then chairing. And I noticed that thousands and hundreds and thousands of students were even unaware about the SDGs. So if we were not knowing what are the goals, how are we going to reach to them? And that propelled me further to keep doing these conferences. And I went on to organize over 50 online Model United Nations conferences in just 3 years. And while doing that, SDG 13 was close to my heart because I had faced climate change in my own village, in my own city. Facing droughts, facing higher level temperature rises was common. And that is why it was common for me to go on and to figure out how I could impact SDG 13, where I figured out the amazing work of YOUNGO and also a lot of other NGOs. And from there, I started helping out YOUNGO in its processes, mainly via advocacy. And that led me to finally end up at COP. So we'll discuss more, but that is the storyline from a macro scale.
Thank you very much. That was very short. Maybe I'm going to go back to you later, but first of all, I'm going to go to the ladies. So Hita, if you would like to go on.
Sure, thank you so much. And apologies for this weird light. The sun is setting in a couple of hours and the angle is changing every few minutes. I started actually a while ago. I've been in this space for a little bit. I finished my master's in environmental studies back in 2014. So it's been a while. And after that, I was actually working as a German language translator. So I really wasn't doing much with the environment right after I graduated. But of course, I was passionate about the environment. And in 2015 was when the COP21 in Paris was going to be taking place. So I kept asking around. I wrote to every single person that I knew at that point. And eventually, finally, through the university, through the organization, I got a badge to go to COP21 in 2015. And this was my first stepping stone into the international world of the UN, but it was extremely overwhelming because I did not know what I walked into. I didn't even know what the negotiations looked like. I was very overwhelmed, very intimidated to talk to anyone new. So I was too afraid to ask questions. I also, before that, went to the Conference of Youth, COP11, which happened in Paris for 3 days before the COP started. But I was too scared even to ask questions there within a youth crowd. It was a good experience, so to say, but I didn't really contribute at all to the negotiations. But the good thing it did for me was that it made me want to come back and quit my job. And then I started volunteering in the climate space for a while. And that's how my journey began. And the next year, I was part of a youth delegation. I went with a youth organization. They were sending a delegation to Morocco for the next COP. And that's how I went in. And this was it was very helpful because I already went with people who I had this connection. I understood a little bit more. And as I went with other young people, I saw how they were interacting at the negotiations. It also helped me break my intimidations, ask questions, speak to other people a little bit. And that's how I became a part of YOUNGO. I went to the meetings that happened every morning. And after the negotiations, I came back home, stayed in touch, joined the YOUNGO mailing list, joined a few working groups. And I've been part of the community since then. So I've now been to 4-5 COPs, I think. and a few intersessions in between. So I've been now in the climate space, in the youth climate space for a while. And now as focal point, it's a different, it was a very different role of, sort of leading, taking these young people. We did internally, of course, with the entire team, a lot of capacity building sessions. We've done training sessions. We've been working to ensure that working groups are also building capacity of their individuals that are members that are part of their groups, and sort of ensuring that the youth who are at COP can really be meaningful, because I know firsthand what it feels like to be lost at a COP. And there are lots of people who have that experience. And we really feel that as much as mentorship or guidance that we can give, it really helps the experience become a lot more better.
Thank you, Hita. This is really impressive listening to the both of you. Like Vedant saying he has organized 50 Model United Nations or something, and Hita is on conferences like even during the year, and you're still either in school or you've been studying. That must be a huge time commitment as well. So also thank you to you guys that you're so committed to that. Disha, how was this with you? When did you start to be engaged in climate change advocacy?
Yeah, firstly, I would like to say that it's so enriching to hear the experiences from both the panelists. Definitely different experiences, but both have their own kind of beauty to it. So with regard to how my journey was, is as I have told, I am from Guwahati, which is in the northeastern part of India. So somewhere or the other, we sometimes feel that northeastern part of India, due to its geographical location, or maybe due to some reasons, there is some lack of access to opportunities compared to the mainland India. And somewhere this intrigued me, webs, etc., that how to get access to those opportunities, being in my own state, being in my own city, etc. So this was one part of my curiosity. And the other thing was I was more involved in ground level advocacy. So I was never into any Model United Nations or any other UN space in particular. I was more working on ground level advocacy. My work was, I went to different colleges, different universities. I interacted with students there about how you can take up climate action in your own individual ways. So this was the work I was doing since around 2 years now. However, when this pandemic started and we all the work got transferred to virtual medium, then I felt there was a what to say, always we felt that access to opportunities because of our geographical location. But now, since everything was on a common platform, I felt that I did not have to go to the capital city, or I did not have to go to any big city to get access to such opportunity. And then I started bringing the work of my community into the international space. So what I did was join initially any webinar I saw related to climate action. I used to join them. It was back in December, I think, this 2020, when I applied and I used to join that. Talk about, there we had discussions, talk about what steps we are taking in our communities. And thereby I came to know about the youth constituency, that is YOUNGO. In January 2021, I came to know about YOUNGO. And then I joined YOUNGO. Firstly, I joined the mailing list. There was bombardment of mails. I did not understand what this was meaning, where this is coming from. But eventually, when I attended the meetings, constituency call of YOUNGO, I came to know that, okay, this is a global youth network comprising of almost 10,000 or even more youth, and they are working for the common goal of climate action. And this is how I came, this was my introduction to the international space. And then I eventually got involved in the working group, etc., etc. Did a couple of work like organized the ACE Youth Forum this year. Then also had the opportunity to convene the side event on behalf of YOUNGO for the Asia Pacific Climate Week this year. There were various engagements throughout from January till the September or October, and then it was COP. And I never imagined that someone from my region or someone from this part of the country will get the opportunity to be at COP and represent anything our world, voices of vulnerable communities. And I feel very happy that I got that chance. But we have to understand that it's not just being there shouting as much as we want, because that will not make the difference. It's about how technically, how understandable the policies need to be written in a different format, and that is not the way we shout and we scream our demands. There is a specific way of bringing that forward, and that was helped. I got the help from YOUNGO, and yeah, as we talk further, we can unveil the things that we have learned throughout this journey, and definitely an enriching experience. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Disha. That's really great to hear how it was for you, that you could join even before that. You didn't even have the thought that this is possible, that you could go. And also what you were saying, that it's not just about going there and screaming, that's what I want, but actually there's a lot of structure and a lot of bureaucracy. And one great thing about the pandemic, well, there are not much, but is that things have moved to the kind of virtual space. So this is why you got into YOUNGO. This is also why we can be here together, while me being in Nepal, you guys being in India, some other people may be joining from other countries. And we can also jump back to COP, and we're gonna watch a short video, and where we can see the closing plenary of 6. I'm sorry, here we go. So I hope that you can all hear it. I'm just gonna show you around 1 minute. So this is the closing plenary of COP26, and we're gonna listen to the speech given by YOUNGO representatives. And we're just gonna listen into shortly, but any of you guys out there who are interested in it, it's actually a very powerful speech, and I would recommend you to watch it. You can just Google COP26 closing plenary, and then you're gonna find this page, and the YOUNGO speech starts at about 3 hours, 30 minutes. So let's see what they have to say.
I'm Adèle from France.
I'm Mark from Hong Kong, and we speak on behalf of YOUNGO, the official children and youth constituency. We would like to thank Italy and other parties that have supported the meaningful inclusion of young people. We are the children and grandchildren you spoke of earlier today. We thank Patricia for being here, but it is unacceptable that most of you have already left the room for dinner and other pleasantries by the time constituencies get the opportunity to speak. We are half of the people that are in the room right now. Stop talking on behalf of us and let us speak for ourselves. Additionally, there has never been a decision focused on the needs and priorities of children and young people.
Okay, I'm gonna stop here. And as I said, for all of you who are interested, you can watch the whole speech later. It's really interesting. And I'm just gonna keep the picture shortly, because we've seen in the beginning that actually Mark was right. The room was almost empty. And it's great that he's supported at least by other people from YOUNGO standing behind him, supporting him, and Madeleine. And there actually, I can spot Hita here, holding a document that says YOUNGO. You can see it very, very tiny on here. And for me, it's very difficult to understand the whole process of COP26. So maybe Hita, you can help me here and quickly elaborate what is the role of YOUNGO on COP26, and what is on that paper that you're holding in the back.
Thank you so much, Paula. Yeah, it was quite a moment actually to be in the room when we were making this intervention. This was after the Glasgow Climate Pact was adopted and everyone was celebrating. And it so happened that the COP president went out for a press interview and everyone left with him. And the room was almost empty. There were some parties who were sitting or had 1 or 2 delegation members from their delegation sitting there. But as you saw at the start, I mean, more or less, the room was entirely empty. And this is a room which has a capacity of close to between 750 to 1,000 people. So if you see about 50 people in the room, it's barely anyone in the room at all. And like I said, at every COP, by the time you get to the closing, especially by the time observers are allowed to speak. It is after everything is completed. It is after the parties have spoken, and then the floor is open for observers. And usually we're used to having, because by the time all the entire proceedings are done, people usually leave. So we're used to being in empty rooms. But we've really, in the past few COPs that I've been, I've really never seen a room as empty as we saw at COP26. And there are different reasons why this might have happened. Of course, people had flights, they had PCR tests to do, they had to run to airports. Also, the COP was delayed by more than 24 hours, by a whole day. And this was, I think, close to around midnight when this happened. So an entire day plus. So there are a lot of other reasons. It wasn't that maybe that they did not want to be in the room, but I think just having a press conference at the same time outside when there are still observers speaking, celebrating a victory of a Glasgow Climate Pact, celebrating a victory of a most inclusive COP is really not, talking about how inclusive in nature the COP can be, because inclusivity is not just about how many people are in the COP. Like Paula, you said, this was the biggest COP that we've ever had. The number of people, especially at the time of a pandemic, to be in the venue was large. But just because there were more people in the COP does not necessarily make it more inclusive. You need to have the stakeholders in the rooms where these negotiations are taking place. A lot of them, of course, understandably, because of COVID reasons, had limitations to how many people could be there. So it was 1 seat per constituency by general, and if there were more seats, more chairs empty, people could walk in after the first 10 minutes after parties had come in. So it was really limiting the number of participation. And even after there are people in the room, you as an observer are not allowed to speak at any of the negotiations unless the floor is opened up by the parties for observers. So there are a lot of different types of structural technical barriers that really, when we think about inclusivity in terms of COP, not just in terms of young people, but also from the other 8 different constituencies, which is either women and gender, farmers, indigenous peoples, local governments, research institutes, so on and so forth. I mean, from every sector, the observer constituencies are, of course, always at the last of everything that happens. But I mean, regardless, just coming back to the question that you asked about the paper that we were holding up. So this was actually YOUNGO's Global Youth Statement. And this youth statement was brought together at the 16th Conference of Youth, which happened in Glasgow a few days before, so at the end of October. And this Conference of Youth, basically, as the name suggests, it's a conference of youth, but it's also entirely run by youth. So the organization, every single thing that happens is entirely done by young people. And this time, for the first time ever, we've had the largest amount of young people contributing to this outcome statement. It also worked because we had a 2-year period, so we could do a virtual conference of youth. We've also done in the past previous local conferences of youth, but we had this scaled up quite a bit, also done virtually, because not everyone, even at the local or national level, could hold this in person. So it also helped reaching out to a larger audience. We worked also with universities to get local level statements from students. All of this put together, basically, this Global Youth Statement that you see, it's a 77-page document. What we're holding up is a 1-pager, and under that, what you don't see is a QR code that you could scan, and it will download the entire 77-page document. And this document has been put together with inputs from 40,000 young people from across the world, everything consolidated by volunteers, by young volunteers on volunteer capacity. So just the scale of what we have achieved with working with young people on volunteer capacity, on very basic funding just to ensure that the logistics of the conference is happening, not staff time. A lot of that really changes when you look at the scale of action that we have really been able to achieve. And the entire Global Youth Statement is focused on the UNFCCC process. So every single topic that is addressed will have a negotiating item under the UNFCCC, and some also go beyond what is being negotiated. But just, this was one side of it. This was basically the youth position that everyone was championing, that was running with at COP26. But then the other side of it is also really just building capacity of young people at COP. And we had a lot of support also to bring these youth to COP, but also to do these capacity building trainings. We internally, I mentioned a little bit at the start, we've done just before COP, 4 capacity building trainings, 3 virtual and 1 at the Conference of Youth in person, to ensure that young people who are going to be at COP can receive the necessary capacity, whether it's technical, whether it's just simply what is the weather going to be like, what kind of shoes to wear, because if you're going to come in high heels to a COP where you're going to be walking a minimum of 10,000 steps a day, you will not survive after the first 2 days. So these are things that you only learn from experience. If you've been at a COP, you cannot anticipate these things sitting outside. So very basic things like this to, technical capacity building of the negotiations, ensuring that youth can engage in working groups, because that is where all the action happens. That is where the real engagement in the negotiation happens, is through the working groups in YOUNGO. And then, of course, the jargon and the technicalities that come with the language, because the language is literally a language of itself. So very simple things like, for example, making an intervention. What does an intervention mean? Or an intervention is basically when you get the chance to speak at a particular, whether it's a negotiation, whether it's a meeting, whether it's a plenary, like a big hall that you saw from the video. For example, a bilateral is a meeting between 2 entities. So it could either be between youth and a country, or just between 2 individuals, but basically between 2 entities, any meeting is usually called a bilateral. So just basic jargon like this on what it looks like, things like that. I mean, I think there's a lot that needs to be done. And then, of course, the biggest barrier is how do you get funding and how do you get badges for young people, because not all young people, actually very few young people are part of organizations that are accredited or that have access to badges under the UNFCCC. So that is one way of getting in, but that's already a big barrier, because how do you know which organization to go to? How do you sort of create that? So one is, of course, through the YOUNGO mailing list. We have 10,000 plus individuals and 1,000 plus organizations. So some of them have accreditation, not all 1,000. But then also through other agencies, like this time we got incredible support from UNICEF as well. We got close to about 51 badges to bring in young people from across the world, mainly Global South, to ensure that they had badges to go to COP. And I think put together from different agencies, also from the UK government, so on and so forth, a little bit here and there. We had close to about 100 badges for young people. So 100 young people who we could additionally bring in addition to youth. Like Disha, for example, got her badge from an organization that is a member of YOUNGO. So she does not fall under the 100 that we're counting. So I think in general, we had the largest delegation ever, all of that putting together. I think we're close to around 200 youth over the 2 weeks at COP26, which is, I think, a milestone in itself.
Yes, thank you, Hita. That's really amazing, having 200 young people at COP26 to represent other young people in the world. And I think that has been a lot of information. And also it shows that it always sounds like a lot of fun, or going to COP and being at that conference and listening to interesting things. But actually there's so much work behind it, and there's so much bureaucracy and administration, what you just said, like all those technical things you had to organize, and then there's no payment for this, it's all voluntary. So it's really interesting also to see how much work is part of that if you're part of YOUNGO and if you have the possibility to travel to COP. And Hita, you've been saying a lot of words, and I think it's impossible for us that not have been there and that are not familiar with YOUNGO to understand the whole thing in a 1 hour and 30 minutes webinar. But maybe we can just dig into more examples. So you've been talking about working groups and negotiations. And I know that Disha, you have been part of negotiations. So maybe you can give an insight in your experience as COP. You had a different role than Hita had. And I think it would be great to get some example and to get some insights for people who do not know much about YOUNGO and COP, about what happened there and how it felt for you to be there.
Yeah. So as the first time, this was my first COP. So obviously I thought all those fancy pictures that I saw so far about COP, I thought that it will be a very cakewalk experience where we just go there, be there, enjoy the moment. But trust me, it's exhausting and frustrating. Why? Now comes the thing. There, firstly, when we talk about negotiations, what is negotiation? obviously we have a certain demands. We have certain demands as youth, as the youth constituency, plus as the working group, we have certain demands. And during this negotiations, what we try to do is try to push for those demands to be inculcated in the actual outcome document or whatever is drafted as an outcome of this entire negotiation process. So this can be extremely frustrating. It's not just what happens during the COP, but it is a lot of work previously before COP. So our work, for suppose when we had to go this time to COP, our work almost started back from January. So January 2021, we had started how our schedule will look and what we want to present in COP26. So that way, each working group had its own mandate. So the working group of YOUNGO, where I belong to or where I'm working with, is the Action for Climate Empowerment, or it can be called as ACE, ACE, ACE Working Group. So the ACE Working Group focuses on Article 12 of the Paris Agreement. So as Paula, you have already mentioned about the Paris Agreement. So it's like the, the rule book or the main structure is that. And under that, there are different articles. So Article 2, suppose, speaks about each member country has its mandate to take actions for robust climate, talks about this action for climate empowerment. And under Article 12 of the Paris Agreement, there are six elements of ACE. So these are the main focus areas where we work on. They are firstly climate education, then climate training, public awareness, public participation, then international cooperation, and these are the public access to information. So these are the six elements of action for climate empowerment that we primarily focus on. So this remains constant throughout our work. But what happens is all our work is regulated by a main constitution kind of document. So there was the Doha Work Program, which was in 2012. It came to power. And from 2012, the mandate of this Doha Work Program was for 8 years. So basically, it got over by 2020. So there were a certain kind of ambitions, plus there were certain kinds of outcomes that we expected from this Doha Work Program. This is like a rule book. So there were certain goals that we achieved. There were certain goals that we did not achieve, etc., etc. So now the time was when 2020 got over. Now was the time to start a new work program. So basically, form a new text. So this was the formulation of the Glasgow Work Program for ACE. So what we did as the youth constituency was we had certain demands. So suppose number one demand was to include youth in the national delegation. So as we understand that there is each country sends a certain delegation on behalf of them to represent them. Suppose India has a national delegation. In this national delegation, what we see is normally bureaucrats or only the government officials are there on behalf of, suppose, India. What we want is to have a youth included in this national delegation. And this was one of our primary demands as the ACE working group, as well as YOUNGO in general. Apart from that, we also want that there should be a national focal point for ACE. And that national focal point should be helped with a youth national focal point. So what will be the mandate of this national focal point is they will look after the 6 elements that I mentioned, like climate education, climate training. So they will be like the go-to person. Anything related to these 6 elements, they will be the go-to person. But most of the countries do not have, as of now, a national focal point. So this was one of our main criteria, main demands. Another one was about climate finance and how the ground level implementation of this climate education, climate training, etc., how this can be supported by the parties working group. And while we talk about the climate finance, we try to bring forward a concept called the ACE marketplace. So what is a marketplace? It will be a virtual platform. The youth constituency wants a virtual marketplace where it will be a virtual platform where there will be funders as well as potential projects available on the same platform, and each one can get access. It will be a very transparent way of getting access to funds, as well as it will be a very transparent process of monitoring evaluation. So this was another one of our demands. So these are some of the things that we demanded. Apart from that, one of the biggest achievement, I would say, is we were successful in having the ACE action plan included in the final text. So what is the ACE action plan is how we move forward from Glasgow. How do we move forward with implementation of ACE? So that requires a certain structure where we will have the opportunity to include our work in this structure, and this got included in the Glasgow work program, and which is a good progress, I would say. And apart from that, inclusion of youth, the inclusion of youth has been good, we would say, because they have said that the ACE Youth Forum, this year, 2021, we had our second ACE Youth Forum, where joined the forum, they got capacity building. When I talk about capacity building, that is at the core of any kind of negotiation, etc., etc. We couldn't have participated in any kind of negotiation or bilateral if we did not get that capacity building. So that remains at the core. And when this 700 students or 700 youth came together in the youth forum, they were helped to get access to the knowledge base. So this youth forum will be, it has been included in the Glasgow work program, and it has been said that an annual youth forum will be held, and also in-session dialogues for ACE will be held. So definitely this just 2 hours to explain everything is like bring everything, all the information all together in very small time. But this is just an overview that I would like to give with our work as the Action for Climate Empowerment Working Group. And definitely one of the most active working groups and doing tremendous work. I just am a voice. There are even more enthusiastic and more active people behind the scene who are doing extremely phenomenal work. And yeah.
Yeah, that is indeed a lot of information. I have just a few follow-up questions to you. It's super interesting, but also very dense. So you said that a part of your demands from the ACE working group have actually been included in the final text. So maybe you can quickly explain again which kind of text that was, and what else is in this text. So maybe what is kind of the role of this text. And then you also said that there was the youth forum, and there will be a youth forum where young people come together and decide actually on what they want to have in those decisions. And maybe you can shortly explain those youth forums again, and also if we have people in the audience who are interested, how they can find more information on these kind of forums.
So firstly, as I said, the Glasgow work program, this is the final outcome of the negotiations which happened under the review of the Doha work program topic. So this is the outcome document, the Glasgow work program. And there we had, it's an exhaustive document. It's a long document. Definitely there are different points. Like firstly, the positives and the negatives, definitely I would like to highlight both. One of the, first starting with the negative point, because one of the main and very saddening is the human rights. The text which mentioned about inclusion of human rights has been excluded from the final outcome document, and this is not something we look forward to. So this will be again talked in the next meeting that we have in June. So this is a carryover. However, this is one of the negative points that we felt. And another negative point is the mention of climate finance, or the kind of importance that we wanted for climate finance somewhere did not get the central stage. Although as the youth constituency, we wanted finance to be addressed more specifically, but it was not mentioned, and it almost remains same as the Doha work program. So the Glasgow work program did not really see any progress with regard to climate finance. But the positives I would like to highlight now is, as the youth constituency, definitely we are very happy. Obviously, there is a lot of work to be done, but as of now, we are happy with the progress of inclusion of youth in the text. Now, the implementation part is the primary part, but as of now, the inclusion in the text is like almost 12 times youth have been mentioned, where they have mentioned that we have to take into consideration the perspectives of youth, this. So it's good that they have at least thought that youth should be included there. Good point is, as I said, the youth forum. So this time, talking elaborately about the youth forum is in June this year, we had the youth forum where there were the entire youth forum was focused into two tracks. The first track was focused on sharing of good practices, bringing perspectives from your own communities. It's more like a general kind of track. And track 2 was more focused on, as I said, capacity building and about policy related work. And our main work was to formulate this Glasgow work program, to work on that, how we can formulate our demands, etc. So there were two distinct tracks. And youth had the 700 youth who joined the forum, they had this opportunity to choose which one they want to focus on, track 1 or track 2, and accordingly they had their sessions divided. Also, we had an entire week devoted to the week of AIDS. So there were different events like the Food and Agricultural Organization of the UN or any other various UN organizations held different side events during this week of AIDS. And this were very enriching. The youth came to know about different working areas, but on the umbrella topic that is ACE, or Action for Climate Empowerment. So this was the week of ACE and the two tracks that we focused on. And the outcome of this forum was we had this outcome document that we circulated again with the different national delegation teams. So we had people, national delegations from South Africa, America, the COP presidency, definitely they supported us a lot. So we had bilaterals with them, we talked with them, we brought forward this outcome document and said that these are our points, kindly give importance to this, we want this to be included. The central one was climate finance and the ACE marketplace. That did not get through. However, the ACE Youth Forum holding of an annual ACE Youth Forum and an in-session dialogue for ACE that went through. The ACE action plan, which I said, roadmap, a structured roadmap is, suppose for climate education, just saying that implement it on ground does not make sense. What are the parameters of understanding that climate education is actually being implemented? So suppose the national curriculum should have climate education included in the curriculum, or training. Suppose when I talk about climate training, having at least 1 or 2 training sessions for the delegation, national delegation, which goes and takes part in the ACE negotiation, something like that. Or for international cooperation, how we bring forward all the different organizations working for climate action together. So these are some of the specific activities that we have highlighted as a part of the action plan. And the details of it are available on our website, ACE Youth Forum website. If you go through it, aceyf.com. So if you go through it, you will get information about this time's ACE Youth Forum, as well as the 2018 Youth Forum. It was the first one. It happened in Bonn, Germany. And that was the first time almost 30 youth from Global South got the scholarship to get engaged in this ACE Youth Forum back in 2018. This time it was a virtual one. And next time, that is 2022, we'll again work. Now we are working on the foundation of how it will look like, etc. So definitely keep an eye on the ACE Youth Forum website. I think all the links will be uploaded there. So keep updated there. And I would suggest, as Hita and or Vedant will further elaborate on YOUNGO's, how to get involved in YOUNGO. Once you are in YOUNGO, feel free to join the ACE working group. It's one of the most active, as I said, and we can guide forward. Yes.
Thank you very much, Disha, and thank you for your guidance and showing what possibilities are out there. And I'm sorry, Vedant, I'm asking you way too late. You've been quiet for so long, but now you're going to have the floor. So I already said that every one of you had different roles. And I think you have been one of the youngest participants from YOUNGO, so probably one of the youngest participants at whole COP. And still you delivered a speech and you had a big audience and a very important role. But we want to listen from you what you actually did there.
Sure. So as Hita and Disha already explained, YOUNGO does a lot of jobs during COP. Few of the roles that they already said was following the negotiations, doing interventions, a lot of stuff like that. So what my work basically entailed was helping craft those powerful interventions that really impact the forum. So I was looking after the teams that drafted that intervention. Usually what happens is we are just given a time of 2 to 3 minutes, which is literally very less, and we have to deliver all our expectations, all that what we observed through the negotiations during that time. So it's really critical to look after those points. So that was one of my role. Other interesting role was the paper that we were talking about, the global youth statement. It was one of our major demand. The whole thing that we were focusing for COP was that, and we were expected to take it to the highest authorities. And one of the opportunities that we got to do so was the World Leaders Summit, which was during the first and the second day of COP, where 120 prime ministers and presidents met together. And it is also a lack of inclusivity that YOUNGO or the global youth, but almost no representation there, no place to speak out their words. But we luckily got, with our efforts from our dear focal points, Hita and Mary Claire, we got one seat at the the World Leaders Summit. And there I had the opportunity to present the Global Youth Statement to a lot of world leaders, speak and introduce youth to them, and also call upon for youth inclusivity in their own nation and also on a global scale. So that was another interesting job that I got to do there. So these were some small highlights, but the other main job were to continuously follow the negotiations. So what exactly happens in a negotiation is country delegations sit, they have a drafted document which have all the progress that has been done on that particular topic, may that be climate finance or loss and damage or agriculture or topics like these. And then they review all those texts line by line, change those wordings to make them more ambitious, and finally to reach the national goals that are national, their particular goals according to their profits, according to their economies, what they have described. So in that process, of course, we as observers do not get the chance to speak, but we do get those chances to communicate and discuss with national delegations. So what are their objectives, what we expect to bring out in that particular text. So those were the minute details that we could put in into those smaller parts of the negotiations, and the whole process was indeed fulfilling. So yeah, that was in brief what I worked upon during COP.
Thank you, Vedant. It's really amazing that you had the possibility to show the youth statement to the World Leaders Summit. So there were like a bunch of presidents and chancellors listening probably to you having your speech. So this is really amazing. And as I understood it right, that was the paper that we have been seeing earlier in the video where Mark was giving the speech. And then I would like to stay, Vedant, with you for the next question. So we heard a lot about what happened on COP26, and Disha, you also said that at least for some outcomes, you're quite happy that the youth are going to be more included maybe in the future, but then some are not part of the conclusions. And I would like to know, as it seemed what you said before, there is never really a time to rest. And so to say, after the COP is before the next COP that will be in Egypt next year. So maybe Vedant, you can say, what are you doing right now? What are your plans for the next month? And what is going to be your goals for COP27?
Yeah, that's a really interesting question. Before I move on to that, I just also like to throw more light on what actually happened at COP and what were the outcomes of COP. So COP26 saw some ambitious outcomes that came in form of Glasgow Leaders Declaration, which worked on deforestation goals. It also came with a new methane pledge to cut almost 30% of world methane. It also came with sustainable cars and trucks, and new avenues opened up which were never thought of before. But at the same time, a lot of big pledges, like the 100 billion pledge, was delayed. No particular commitment came on the loss and damage, and a lot
Can
of.
you explain that? Sorry for interrupting you, but
Yeah.
maybe some people in the audience are not do not know as much as you do. So what can you explain, for example, what is the 100 billion pledge, and maybe, yeah, and then just go on. Sorry for interrupting.
Sure. So, as we know, climate change is impacting all countries and there are no barriers. However, the countries like, especially in the global south, the African, the South American, the Asian countries, which are minor contributors in terms of emissions, are getting more adverse effects of climate change. And they are not able to cope up with those tremendous effects, especially in terms of loss and damage. So there is a global responsibility on the developed countries who are giving out those emissions to cover up and to help those developing countries with technology and mainly finance so that they can build themselves back. And that is why all nations agreed that they would deliver $100 billion to developing countries in a proper way, which is not yet discovered or not yet implemented. And that was to be happened by 2020, which is now pushed down to 2023. So that was one of the setbacks that we saw. Even after, and adding more to that point, what we saw was in every negotiation, there would be a divide between developing and developed countries, where countries like the Asian, the African Group of Nations, the SIDS, the LDCs, like the least developed countries, would demand something and developed countries would resist to do so. So there are a lot of divides still on topics that entail mainly finance. So that was one of the setbacks that we saw at this COP. So what we did was we also followed every negotiation and took notes and took the stock take so as to analyze what progress happened so far and how do we move forward. And we analyzed different stuff. So one of them was like I took the stock take of all the major commitments and pledges that came out, which was like a, a a standpoint where we could understand how do we move forward to, and that is the place where we analyze where the youth can work forward in the next year before the COP as well. So as Disha and Hita said, there's a lot to say and 1.5 hour less. But if the audience has more curiosity to know about what went well and what went wrong at COP26, I have one source to refer where I listed a lot of those outcomes of COP. And that is the place where we understand what we can do forward. And I'll leave it there. Yeah.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much for sharing this. Super helpful for people who want to dig deeper in this. So actually about that, so before we go on to questions and answers, I would love to know what can you give people on the way that are interested in climate change advocacy and that want to get engaged. So maybe also connected to the question that I had before, what are your plans for 2022? On what do you guys work right now? And how can people get involved that would like to and that are interested? So Hita, maybe you can start with this and then the others can join as well.
Sure. Yeah, I think first, if you'd like to get involved in YOUNGO, I put the link in the chat a few minutes ago. I will paste it again in a bit. It's very simple. We're open to anyone under the age of 35. That's literally the only criteria because we are the youth constituency. It's a very simple Google form that you sign up, and in 1 week's time, our team should be adding you to the mailing list. And once you're on the mailing list, like Disha mentioned, you can pick a working group that you like. We have close to about 20 working groups in YOUNGO, so pick a topic that interests you and start engaging within the working group. I think this is a good time now. Currently, of course, after COP, it's been a little slow. Everyone's taking some time off. COP is always usually very intense. And it's also the end of the year. But from next year, we will get started again. So there are going to be some debrief meetings internally for working groups. Some working groups have already had them, some not yet. And also strategy meetings for the next year. So I think this is a good time. If you're new and you want to be involved, there's going to be a lot of learnings that you can get from the previous COP, but also really build up and be prepared for COP27, because it's definitely valuable to be at a COP with some sort of training, with some sort of capacity building, because without that, you're just there as a COP tourist, as I call it, but not really understanding, not really knowing what's going on. So the link is back in the chat if you would like to sign up to YOUNGO. And I think plans for that, leading on with that, for plans for 2022, I think as the youth constituency, because we will be having a change of focal points are elected from COP to COP. So from January onwards, we will have new focal points in YOUNGO, who will be replacing myself and Marie Claire. For the first 2 months will be an initial handover process internally amongst us, where we will have internal handover processes. The constituency does not get affected by any of this at all. And Marie Claire and myself will anyway stay around for a while, ensuring that things are in order, that partnerships, projects, plans, all of that is working out as we had scheduled. So that is one side of things. The other side of things is I also work on climate change education. So I'm currently, actually my entire team is here as we speak. I'm working with my team revamping our climate change education program, building up, scaling up on that a little bit. So on the personal front, I'm also going to be doing a little bit of that. I work part-time with the UNDP in the Asia Pacific as a coordinator for the Youth Empowerment and Climate Actions Program that UNICEF is also a convener of. So a little bit of things all in the broader picture of climate and youth engagement. And yeah, that's going to be what it looks like also for me on the personal front, but also for YOUNGO. We will, of course, be having a conference of youth in Egypt, so COP17. We will be having a virtual conference of youth before that, and series of local and regional conferences of youth as well. So definitely a good time to be involved, join working groups, really come together and build capacity, whether you come to COP or not. It really helps to understand a little bit of the space, to understand how your voice can be a part of the process, even if you're not at the COP. So really be a part of the collective in that sense.
Disha, you want to add something?
Yeah, as Hita said that this is like the time where we are taking some break from the work that we have done in COP, trying to debrief, go through that, because this is a very mentally exhaustive process. Also, we try to sit down, take into consideration what went right for us, as personally also we were there, how things were, which were the goals that we, because while we go to a COP, it's not just there are demands, but we also look into, there is so much of networking, etc., etc. So everything, summing it up, like the debrief that we are having today, same kind of debriefing. That is on the personal front. And as Hita mentioned that in YOUNGO, the working group that I am working with, so the working group is also going through formulating new strategies of how the next year will look like, what we want to present in COP27, what it should look like, everything. We are going through that. And definitely the working group also has different goals, sub goals. So each goal will be led by someone. We are thinking which person should take which role, etc., etc. So a lot of structuring, restructuring of things. Apart from that, what I am doing on my personal front is as similar to Hita, that the climate education. So since what I felt throughout my engagement is there is a huge gap between the international work and the ground level work, because even in the chat, I saw a comment that a lot of work being done on the ground level, but they do not get the channel how to get involved in the international space. So what I'm doing now after COP is I'm getting involved in an internship project where I'll be leading around a group of students from different universities of India, and I'll be coordinating with them how they can get involved in climate action, how they can get involved, how their work can be actually channelized into the different mediums. So everything related to ground level work. I'm more focusing on that at this time, because this is relatively a more less hectic time, because once we get into maybe June, July, it's like totally hectic and it's too much work. So now it's like understanding things and thinking how next year.
Yes, thank you so much. And I think that also shows how big your commitment is, and also for us today, because actually you said you're just on your break after COP, and now already we're coming and asking you to tell us about COP. So there's never really a break for you guys. So thank you so much for being here. And I also, what I think is very important, what Hita said about representing youth and consulting with other young people. So you actually can only represent us if we also talk to you and correspond with you and kind of tell you what we want, because otherwise you cannot represent anyone if you don't know what young people around the world want. So to all people out there listening today, get involved. It's great if you have YOUNGO focal points at your country or YOUNGO groups. Get involved and raise your voice. And you can also do that right now, because we're going to move on to the question and answer session. Finally, it's your turn after I post all the questions I want to know. So actually you can raise your hand and we can unmute you, and then you can ask your question. I already saw that there were some questions in the chat and in the Q&A. Those of you who already said this, maybe you just want to raise your hand, and then we can actually hear you posing your question.
Okay, so I'll just come in here, I think, and I see that Jibrin Bichara has a question. Jibrin, would you like to ask your question?
Sylvain, excuse-moi.
Yeah, hello, Jibrin. Yes.
Oui, allô? Je vous écoute.
We can hear you. Go ahead.
Oui, par rapport au programme. Par rapport au programme sur le développement du leadership de la jeunesse que vous avez énuméré, mais je ne vois pas l'opportunité concernant les jeunes des pays sous-développés. Parce que le programme vise à renforcer le leadership des jeunes des pays en voie de développement, mais les jeunes qui se retrouvent dans les pays sous-région de l'Afrique, des Cornes de l'Afrique, ils ne se trouvent pas les opportunités, quoi. Est-ce que vous pouvez étendre votre réseau, l'accès aux services et au développement des jeunes des pays sous-développés? C'est ça mon inquiétude. Merci. Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Jibrin. I'm going to try my best. My French is a bit limited, but what I could understand is that he has been asking how the developing country in Africa can be heard at COP and how their voices can be heard as well. Am I right, Jibrin? Otherwise, maybe if you could phrase your question in English, that would be helpful, but that's what I could hear out of it. And Hita, if you want to go first, please go ahead. Do you want to go again, Jibrin? Otherwise, maybe unmute yourself so we can listen to Hita's response.
Ok, d'accord.
Thank you.
Thank
Merci.
you.
Merci.
Yeah, thank you for that question. YOUNGO is a global network, so we're literally open to anyone from anywhere in the world. We are currently close to about 10,000 members from 160 plus to 170 countries. A lot of our members are from Africa. So we really have a very strong presence. We would encourage you to join. The link is just in the chat. I can paste it one more time to join YOUNGO, and you can literally just sign up. We really have no barriers, whether it is where you're coming from, what languages you speak. Language barrier is still a thing. We're trying to break it, of course, because even all the documents in the UNFCCC are in English. So all our documents, most of our communication is in English, but we're trying to be inclusive as much as we can, especially in smaller meetings. But other than that, I think other than the language barrier, we're really trying to be open to anyone from anywhere in the world. The other criteria is, of course, you need to be under the age of 35 years. But yeah, we have lots and lots of members from Africa. Even, I'm not sure which country you're from, but I'm 100% sure there will be someone in YOUNGO who is from your country. I would actually, coincidentally, on that note, actually the next focal point, the next Global South focal point is from Zimbabwe. So I think African Voices, and my previous focal point, the one who I succeeded, was from Nigeria. So we really have Africa everywhere in the lead, but in participation. So I think that's you can really be a part of that community and contribute along with your colleagues and peers.
Thank you for that, Hita. So Paula and team, another person who's raised their hand is, their name here is Alliance for Peace and Climate, but I believe their name is Mohammed Osman. So Mohammed, I'm putting you on the mic. Can you unmute yourself, Mohammed?
Thank you very much. Vended and on this virtual meeting. My name is Mohammed. I'm from Somalia. I work with the government of Somalia as Director General with the Ministry of Transport, and also the founder of Alliance for Climate and Peace. I'm very glad that you, if not all of you, some of you have presented us at COP26 and have magnificently contributed to that. And in fact, it's very essential for young people to stage to that level of taking part in the decision-making process, and also to witness the decisions and pledges that are made by the world leaders, and also avail themselves to that platform so that they decide on their own future. As you know, climate change is one of the global threats, and each and every state globally feels the effects of climate change. In Somalia, there is a lot of drought right now. There is erratic rainfall. There is severe hunger. There is a lot of internal displacement, and all those results are brought by the effects of climate change. So we, as the young leaders, or we as the young people across the world, should be readily and at every time be available in combating climate change, taking part in global efforts, helping state, national, and global level to make sure that climate change are averted, are worked on, are combated, and also make sure that we fully contribute. And we as the young leaders, we need to raise awareness globally, because some of our youth may somehow be challenged by, because we know, like Somali, we are agro-pastoralists, and most of our Somalis here in our population amounts from 7 to 75% are youth. So most of the people who are devastated, affected by climate change, are also youth. Those who are displaced by droughts outside the towns are youth. So we need to make sure that we pervasively or widespreadly raise awareness to our youth across the world. And I'm very glad that Vendet and very many people have reached there at COP26, and I'm very glad that you represented us. So here's the question, even though I raised it there in the question and answer, but due to network, it went out, and then that's why I again asked for the YOUNGO survey. So the question is that you as young leaders have been there representing us, the youth, the young leaders. How do we make sure that our involvement towards climate change are made certain? Because we as the young leaders, we are very committed, and we need to join globally in the effort towards climate change. So how do we make sure as young people can be involved in the engagements at global level? That's the first question I would like to ask to Vendet and to many other people. With that, thank you very much, and I'm very glad to have carried up with you on this very important occasion, trying to exchange your ideas, learn from you. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Mohammed. Yeah, back to the panelists and Paula.
Awesome.
Yeah, please.
Yeah, sure. So that's a great question. To answer your question, I'd like to begin by saying that as far as I have understood this space, there are two major ways to contribute as youth to the climate change realm. One is via advocacy, and second is via innovation. So even advocacy, what we do is promote the present solutions and make the leaders to work on those solutions. So if you have that innovation, if you have the idea of what kind of solution can end your problem, that is the first step that you need to take up. Secondly, you need to narrow down your problem, really go into the nitty-gritty of what is your personal problem, what is your community facing. Second, build up an advocacy plan to tackle that problem. So now you have the problem narrowed down, you have the solution understood. Now you build up the advocacy plan. So what you do is basically understand who are the key players, who are those having the powers to change that particular setting, the change, and bring that solution to your problem. So you understood now the problem, the solution. Now you also know who are the key players. Now it is the key to reach out to those key players and promote your solution via advocacy. And that is done via platforms like YOUNGO, platforms like several other international organizations, and it might be your own as well in the future. So these are the stepping stones through which you can get your problems to solve via solutions. And also, it's not just advocacy, but also innovation. So not just not just getting up to the leaders and saying that we want these present solutions converted, but also figuring out new ways, because there are new problems emerging every day, and there are a lot of opportunities in the field of research as well. So those are some amazing avenues to explore, that I would say.
Thank you so much, Vedant. I think we have time for maybe one very short, quick question, and then we have to move on because we're almost at the end of the time. So if there's someone, please raise your hand and try to keep it very short.
Sorry about that. I think there's one more person. Akanksha Yadav wants to come in, and then finally maybe Cholpan can come in after that. Akanksha, do you want to try to say something?
Good evening, everyone. Maybe I will not speak perfect English, but I will try. My question is how to implement related to COP26.
Can you maybe say it again, your question? That would be great. I think we're not sure what you're asking for. Just repeat your sentence.
Akanksha, would you like to ask again in Hindi?
Okay, ma'am. मैम मेरा क्वेश्चन ये है कि जैसे कि COP26 अब तक इतनी सारी कॉप्स हुई हैं, तो इसमें इम्प्लीमेंट क्या हुआ? हम हर बार बात करते हैं क्लाइमेट चेंज के बारे में, लेकिन ये मतलब इतना ज्यादा वो क्यों नहीं हो रहा है? लोग, हमारी जो गवर्नमेंट है वो क्यों नहीं इस पे इतना ज्यादा ध्यान दे रही है? मैम मेरा क्वेश्चन यही है मैम, बहुत ज्यादा क्यूरियोसिटी है कि क्यों नहीं वर्क हो पा रहा है। हम लोग इतना ज्यादा कोशिश करते हैं, हम यूथ हैं, फिर भी गवर्नमेंट इतना ध्यान नहीं दे रही है।
Hita or anybody, would one of you guys like to translate that first before answering? Thank you, Akanksha. Good question.
Okay.
Maybe Disha, if you want to go because you haven't spoken, you can translate and then we can go. You can say what you want and then we can go.
Yeah, firstly, Akanksha, thank you so much for the question. And this is the frustration and the remorse in her voice itself says that she is very frustrated with the fact that there have been so many COPs so far, but why the governments are not implementing it. What the frustration can be heard in the voice itself. So my reply to this is definitely this COP is, as we said, COP is like the work that is being done throughout the year. It's just the meeting of the parties. They talk about it, they negotiate there, etc., etc. It's all technical things that they are doing there at COP. But what needs to be done is implementation, and that is what we are trying to highlight, that implementation is at the core. Text, you have spoken enough, now it's time for implementation. That is what we are saying. And definitely implementation requires climate finance, and climate finance is not being focused by governments. As Vedant has mentioned, that the developed countries owe 100 billion. Like, this is the commitment that they made so long back, and they haven't transferred that yet to the developing countries. There is the problem of scientific transfer also, because this developing country, suppose for India, if we talk about India and the controversial stand of India of phase out coal or phase down coal, what India said is, we are a developing country. We have this concern of balancing our development with the action towards climate related work. So we have to understand that such alternative scientific measures should be transferred to countries like developing countries, so that they can resort to any other alternate sources of implementation, rather than fossil fuels, or rather than resorting to coal. So some things remain at the core of these problems. Governments, definitely, they have their own. The problem that we felt while talking with the government representatives is, they always said that we have our own priorities. The governments, because they are different countries, they have their own set of priorities and differences. So keeping their priorities, keeping their national interests apart, and talking for a common goal is difficult. They are not yet with that mindset that we need to talk about this global agenda, this global problem, which will affect all the countries equally, and the developing countries even worse. They are not yet understanding the catastrophe that will happen in the next few years. So this is our demand. And as youth constituency, we are doing that only, that we are trying to highlight things like implementation requires climate finance. Youth projects on ground require climate finance. Why don't you talk about it? So we are trying to bring that on board, having our voices included in the national delegation bill. This is the thing. If we have youth in the national delegation, definitely we will have a more bigger say in the decision making process. So this is where the problem lies. If we do not have our voices, how much as an observer, how much we shout, it's the impact remains limited. So this are some of the things that I felt needs to be said, and I totally feel, I empathize her. We all of us at COP, whoever was there, all of us were feeling the same kind of sadness, and it feels bad. Now while I speak, I feel this is the most heart-touching moment when I speak, because all throughout I was taking all technical, but now when I'm talking, it's, and the language barrier, if you, it's, we are able to talk to you, we are able to speak there because we can speak English. There are many people who cannot speak English, and what does that mean? That they do not have the right to be represented? It's not so. So everyone's voice should be heard there, and it's our duty to represent them better.
Yeah, so first, thank you, Akansha, for that very great question that produced that very great answer. That was, I think, touching all of us, and many of us who are in the same age do have the same feeling, I guess. As I said before, I was born in the year of the first COP, and now I'm moderating this. So what has happened in the last 26 years? Vedant, please go in, but try to keep it quickly. I try to get one more question and then we have to wrap up soon, but please make your point.
Yeah, sure. I just wanted to add on to what Disha said, and wanted to say that keep up the good work, because what youth is doing, what the pressure youth is putting on is slowly showing the results. Things like 1.5 are given more focus. Loss and damage is now into the discussions. So the finance is on the go and it will soon come in. But the pressure that we are trying to put in from all directions will surely show results, and we need to keep it going. It is not like that there are no outcomes coming out of it, and there are lots of rays of hope. Yeah.
Okay, thank you for that. And then we have one more question. Swati, if you could unmute, I'm not sure if I have the right to do so.
Yes, I can. So Cholpan, you are our last but not the least. Would you like to ask your question? You are unmuted. Cholpan?
Yeah, I think you can hear me now, yeah?
Yes, perfectly.
Well, Colleagues, thank you very much to each of you, because, we are colleagues because we are, let's say, the representatives of youth and basically from all over the world. But what you have been doing, in the working groups of the YOUNGO, individually, I very much believe in all of that, because I am actually doing the same thing in my country. And I strongly believe that climate advocacy and education actually is the foundation for the action to start towards addressing the climate issue. So knowing how still so many people, do not know or are not maybe fully recognizing, yes, the magnitude of the problem, I still very much believe that this climate education, is the key actually to start. So the question is very simple. When I heard that it's possible to become this representative of ACE and basically that you were pushing it, based on this year-long work now at Glasgow, actually it used to be included in the national delegation and everything. I have been like very close to these issues in my country this year, and actually it has been a very big issue in terms of this inclusion, participation, not only of youth, but this various stakeholders, women and others. So considering all of this, I really want to be in, and I would like to really join forces. You said that, okay, starting from the new year already, we are going like to, continue. So I want to be in that. And I am in YOUNGO, I'm registered, and that's very enriching because you get so much information from just every part of the world. And yeah, that's how I also got to this webinar. And I'm very lucky that I got here, because I was invited also to join the national delegation after a big, let's say, effort. But then due to some personal, mostly reasons, I did not attend this year's COP. But I want that to happen to a lot of other youth here in my country, because there are a lot of great young people, I very much believe that things are possible in this area. So that's why I want to be joining you guys. Thank you. That was the question.
Thanks, Cholpan. Appreciate it. Back to the panelists. I think Hita would like to answer.
Yeah, just really quickly, in interest of time, thanks for that question. And I'm glad you're finding YOUNGO at least a little bit informative and you can feel it helpful. I think one of the easiest ways is, of course, to work, like you said, you've already been working with the youth in your country, and it seems like you have a decent relationship with the government as well. I think this is a very promising position to be in, to really just be the point of contact between them, ensure that the demands, everything that you're talking about can be put into practice, because a lot of time there's a disconnect between this. So it's good to have this communication going. Also to try and work and to continue this communication, to try and see how your country can maybe have a youth delegate as part of the national delegation. And this is not just having a youth delegate who they bring for maybe taking notes or whatever, really, we have almost about a year or like 8 or 10 months now for the next COP. So really building capacity of these young people. And again, how are these young people chosen? Are they part of, do they really do a consultative process in which they bring these youth, or is it just young people that are being cherry picked? And I think if you're in this middle position, I think it's one of the best positions to be in. You can really make the most out of this, where you really can position, and you can also make sure that when you understand both sides of the picture, I think it's really useful. So I would say continue doing what you're doing, make sure that you can really just advocate, push, and maybe have a youth delegate, maybe 2 young people, ensure that the capacity building is done. On that note, we're also within YOUNGO thinking for the next year, we're working on a youth delegate youth negotiator program. So we're going to be working with the UN and with governments to ensure that we can have trained young people who can be a part of the national delegations. So there are different modalities. Continue engaging in YOUNGO, and I'm sure that there will be something that you can find with the experience that you have already so far.
Yes, thank you for that last question. I'm sorry that we don't have time for more questions. We're already over time. Also, a big thank you to the delegates from my side. It was a pleasure to interview you and to get to know you. And before we stop, so this is from my side, and I'm gonna give over now to my colleague Swati from India to give the closing remarks. And thank you to everyone who asked questions, and thanks very much to the panelists.
Thank you so much to everyone, Hita, Vedant, Disha, last but not least, Paula. I think this was really interesting. And as you can see, we have a global audience. And so we've not only spoken to, I think, an Indian audience, but we're really hoping that we are amplifying the work that's happening already, that's already being led by our participants in other countries as well. Just to note that before you all leave, when you close this webinar, there will be a survey that pops up, or a question will be asked. If you want to take a survey, please do take a survey. Let us know how you like this webinar, what types of webinars you'd like in the future, how we can improve. And I'm just going to share one screen before everybody leaves. So UNICEF has a platform called UNICEF has a platform called YouReport. So YouReport can be accessed through WhatsApp, through Facebook Messenger. And so one issue that has come up very strongly in the past is mental health. And as more and more people become engaged in climate change, and as Akansha is asking, we as youth do a lot in climate change. We need more people to listen to us, and sometimes you might get frustrated, and sometimes you might feel that you need some mental health support, or you want someone to talk to, or get some resources to figure out how to feel good and not so frustrated and depressed. And so UNICEF has a platform called YouReport, where millions of young people are registered and they access these resources every day. So if you have WhatsApp, you can dial this number. So I don't know if someone wants to type this number out in the chat. You can dial this number and you can send the word mHealth, and you'll get our chat bot to respond to you, asking a few key questions, and then sharing with you some resources that you can use to tackle any mental health issues or needs that you'd like to work on, and for yourself, for your community, for anyone else that you love. So with that, I do want to close this. Say thanks to everyone who has joined us today and also participated, and we will be sending resources soon after this webinar as well. Thanks for joining, and please do join again in our future sessions. And have a good evening.